Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are talking all about obsessive and intrusive thoughts and how to stop them. Have you ever had the experience where one thought or scenario constantly goes round in your mind? This could be thinking about the past, thinking about the future, thinking about another person, worrying what other people think of you, or worrying about making an important decision. Well, if this sounds like you are not alone. In this teaching, we'll explain how this kind of obsessive thinking can be simple to get rid of once you understand where these thoughts come from and techniques to control them. Okay, David. So if I am obsessively thinking about something in the past or worst case scenario outcomes in the future, what's going on here?
So this is a great question because it will cover two or three of the basic Wu Wei wisdom techniques. So we're going to be covering the golden thread technique. So if you're new to our channel, you can understand how we do that. We're going to be covering the inner child. We're also going to be covering the pendulum because this question covers all of those. So the first thing is, if you are choosing, now you remember, now notice I put that word in. If you are choosing to focus and to concentrate on the things that you said, say the past, the most common question I get asked from my clients, David, how do I let go? You see, and that question means the inner child's involved because it's what I call a victim statement. How do I let go? Tell me how to let go. And the question should be, why am I choosing to hold on? So the question I would ask you if you came to me, David, I'm focusing on the past, I would try and say, why don't you say, why do you choose to focus on the past?
And that choose word is a kind of a real stickler because a lot of people will say, David, this obsessive thinking, it's ruining my life. It's keeping me awake at night. It's distracting me from my work. It's stopping me from being happy. I don't want to keep thinking about this same thing all the time. I want to get rid of it. How can you say I'm choosing it because I want to get rid of it?
But you see, there's the linguistic twist that I'm talking about. The way you're presenting this and the way my clients present it, it's almost like their thinking is controlling them. The thinking is kind of outside of them and they are a slave or a hostage to their thinking. And that's where it goes wrong because that's why I call it an inner child victim statement. And for those of you who are new to our channel, when I'm talking about the inner child, I'm talking about a part of your mind. You may be calling it your ego or your subconscious mind or your emotional mind, but it's a part of your mind that believes it's under attack. It's being controlled by something outside of it, in this case, the thinking. But if you think about it logically, just with me, just drop your shoulders and take a breath. How can you be a slave to your own thinking? That's why just practicing, I choose. Why am I choosing to hold on to this? And that puts the responsibility back onto you. That makes you accountable for your thoughts and your thinking.
So you're saying, ask ourselves, why am I choosing to hold on to this thought? Why am I choosing to let this thought or this scenario or this person constantly go round in my mind?
That's right, because then it moves the responsibility and the accountability onto you. And that's going to be the first step in a few step process of changing and putting yourself in control rather than being responsive, rather than you being the victim of your own thoughts.
So you mentioned the inner child.
Yes.
Is it our inner child, that part of our mind that we call the inner child, that is making the choice compared to, say, our adult self or our authentic self?
Yes, it's a part of the mind that I think works better if you give it the label, the inner child. And I'll explain a little bit later on why it works better. But what is always at the base of this is, again, another fundamental important Wu Wei teaching that you hear me say on every video. And let me reassure you, this is the most important teaching that you'll hear in this video today. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim of them. Every emotion that you experience inside of your body, you have created. No one else. No one else can make you feel. If you use words like, oh, they made me feel, he made me feel, she made me feel, that will make me feel. What you're doing again, you'll see what you're doing. You're doing what we call the flip. You're moving the responsibility away from you and you're placing it somewhere else. And then you're the victim. You're in a reactive state. And that's part of the mind that we call the inner child. The inner child is constantly trying to control the outside, so it is protective. And with all of these statements, Alex, this at the base of it, and I'll demonstrate it to you is in a moment, there is a belief that you can be emotionally safe or you can be emotionally protected. And that is the basic misunderstanding in this question that we've been sent in.
Okay, so I want to try and pick this apart a little bit. So what you're saying is that we start to obsessively think about things, or our inner child does, that part of our mind, the inner child starts to constantly overthink, ruminate on things when it believes it's under attack or under threat by a situation, either that is existing now or going to happen in the future, or another person. So we overthink when we believe somehow something bad's going to happen, that we're under threat.
So let me try and make it a little bit more clearer. The inner child part of your mind will have expectations, a scenario of the way that it would like reality to be. And if it was like that, if people acted like that, if your job went that way, if your friends were this way, if your family were like this, if your children were like this, if you were like this. So it has this very narrow perception image of how things should be, how she would like them to be. And that path is very narrow, very fine. And the problem is what the inner child believes, that if it's not the way it wants it to be, then the emotions will be so intense, so overwhelming, overpowering, that it will not be able to cope. You see the three lies. I'm not good enough. I can't cope. I'm unlovable. So it projects ahead on a scenario of almost like a thin light of how everything should be in its eyes. And then it sees that reality isn't like that at all. And then it creates the red light feelings.
Okay, so I can see how that would apply to thinking about future outcomes. So the inner child or inner child mind wants a positive outcome. It projects ahead and then anticipates the worst happening, actually not being a good outcome. So, and that's what it gets fixated on.
Yes, trying to stop that from happening.
It's trying to stop. How does that apply to if we're constantly overthinking and ruminating on the past?
Well, it's the same thing, a little bit more complicated because the inner child's put another layer in. So it's looked at the past as a situation or an event that it experienced really powerful, intense red light feelings. So I don't know, somebody could have had an affair or broken up a relationship or suddenly get sacked or somebody did something that you didn't like. And so the child then the child part of your mind experienced these extremely intense feelings. And so the child says, I'll make sure that that will never happen to me again. So therefore now I'm going to take the past and I'm going to now project that into the future.
Oh,
So the
okay.
next time I choose a partner, the next job, the next boss I meet, the next person, I'm going to try and make sure that they follow my very strict guidelines. And if they don't, then I create a feeling. So again, you see, all the time, you're the hostage to your emotions. Doesn't matter what you do, you can't get out of this. This is why we call it the carousel of despair. You're going round and around as in the carousel. Because the truth is, in reality, it will never be exactly how you want it to be. And so the child says, well, therefore, it like throws up its hands. He says, well, therefore, I can't cope with it. I can't cope with it. It's too much for me. And so it starts to then say, well, if I did this, if I put this in order, if I said this, if I please people, here's people pleasing. If I please people, if I get liked by everybody, if everybody likes me, you see, and then it starts to layer on this layer upon layer upon layer.
So I can see in that example, you said stuff from the past, the inner child ruminates and then brings it into the present and then projects it into the future. I never want that to happen again.
Exactly.
What about if we are overthinking and ruminating on almost like stuff we've regretted from the past that cannot be undone? One-off things.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So if you've made the mistake as in the past, the inner child's almost like an executioner. It will be unmerciful. It will absolutely find you guilty and be judge and jury and executioner, and it will create this feeling of guilt. Now, a feeling of guilt means you haven't learned the lesson, and the child is trying to control you so you don't make a similar mistake.
Okay.
And there's the problem again, you see. So the child immediately, and this happens in a blink of an eye. Don't think this is something you sit and ruminate and meditate on for months and then come out with this solution. The inner child acts like that. And so it sets and it says, well, you made a right mess up of that. It's your fault. This always amazes me, how the inner child blames you. It's like there's two different people inside of you. What part of you is he blaming? It's almost like the inner child saying, it's nothing to do with me. I'm innocent here. It's down to you. And now I've got to control you. You see, this is nonsense thinking because you've created a separation in your mind and you've got to bring that together. And the way you bring that together is to look at this and to understand the first fundamental teaching. You are the creator of your emotions, not the victim of them. You do not instigate or create the event, but you do create your response to the event.
So the emotions, because we're talking about obsessive thoughts here.
Yes.
We're not talking about emotions,
No,
or
we
are
are
we?
talking.
Okay, so where are the emotions in this equation then, David? Do they come before or after the obsessive constant thinking?
And this is the nub of this
Okay.
question. This is really the nub. So you have a thought, and then it creates an emotion. Now you believe that you're the victim of the emotion. So now you create a thought to try and stop you from experiencing the emotion first of all. So when I work with clients who have this obsessiveness, it's normally, not every time, but about relationships. I don't want to be let down again. And so they put a future partner through an interrogation. They almost lift the expectations levels so high that they're almost praying that the partner will fail. And then they can say, there you are, look, there you are. I told you he'd let me down. I told you she wouldn't come up to the mark. I told you right. So they create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is the carousel of despair. But what they're doing is to saying, and this is what my clients will say to me almost every session, I don't want to be hurt again. You see? So they don't want to be hurt again. They haven't understood that they created the hurt. And then they create another set of emotions to stop creating the hurt that only they created.
Okay, so
It's a bit complicated, isn't it?
well,
But
I'm going to
stick with me.
try and break this down. So we have the external stimuli.
Yeah.
So That could be a situation we're in or a person we've met. That's it. That's external stimuli creates a thought within us.
Yes.
So if it's a relationship, you've met a person.
Yes.
The thought is this relationship is going to go badly.
That's right. I don't want to be hurt again.
I don't want to be hurt again.
See, so you're not...
The emotion then...
They can't hurt you though,
Okay,
Alex.
so stimuli, thought, I don't want to be hurt again. This is good. Right. Emotion, anxiety, red light feelings, sweaty palms, worry, fear.
Exactly. Judging them, looking at everything they do and they say.
Okay, so they're the emotions.
Yes.
So then we have another thought in response to those emotions,
That's right.
which is, this is going to be a disaster. I've got to protect myself.
I've got to test them.
I've got to look
at their phone and make sure they're not.
And then that becomes the obsessive thought.
Absolutely.
Or have we got, so we've got stimuli, thought, emotion, red light emotion.
Thought, emotion.
Okay. And so it becomes a cycle.
Circle.
So the thinking, the obsessive thinking, if you like, is fueled by the emotion.
Yes.
But okay, so I can see how it becomes, it's almost like a spark, an ignition.
That's right.
We have the thought, the red light emotion comes in. We want to get rid of the emotion. We think more obsessively, what can we do to protect ourselves? Then we think about worst case scenarios. Then we get more red light feelings. Then we have more thoughts. And then it goes round and round. And all the while, this is our inner child.
Yes. This is the inner child stuck on a carousel, completely out of their depth. They don't understand what's going on. They see themselves as a victim. They see themselves being held hostage by emotions and other people. And they're doing what any child would do. They create a cocoon around them to keep themselves emotionally protected. But how can you be protected from emotions that only you create? Think about that statement. How can you protect yourself from emotions that only you create? And so therefore there's a never-ending cycle. It's the perfect carousel that this question asks us. Repeated thoughts, and you're on the carousel. Thoughts, emotions, emotions, thoughts, emotions. And so one sparks off each other, and then you get onto this carousel. And it's a little bit like a dog with a bone. You know, when you get those dogs that hold onto the bone and you pick them up and they won't let go, you won't let go of this thought, because now this cycle becomes very familiar to you. And remember, as human beings, we're very pattern seeking. So that pattern becomes your pattern. And then before you know what you're doing, it's taking over you. And then that proves to yourself, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm now a victim of my own thoughts. You see, now all these thoughts, can you stop these thoughts? Clients will say, can you stop these thoughts? And I'm going, well, who's thinking these thoughts? And they go, well, as you said, I don't want to think them. Well, I'm sorry, you do, because you're thinking them. That's why the word choice is very important.
So I can see we're leading towards really how we break this carousel. How do we break this cycle? But before we go any further, I just want to ask, at the beginning, you mentioned the pendulum, what we talk about, the emotional pendulum. How does that fit into the equation of what we've just talked about, David?
Well, the part of your mind that we call the inner child will always want to see things as two extremes: right, wrong, yes, no, good, bad. And so it will either say, I am the victim. I use that analogy that someone's let you down as in a relationship. So it must be me. There's something wrong with me. That's why they left. That's why they had an affair. That's why they wasn't happy with me. They left because of me. Or they'll swing the opposite way. It must be every man. It must be every woman. I can't trust anybody now. And so you see, it's like a pendulum. They will swing from one to the other, back to the other, or a lot of my clients will get stuck on one. And then they're stuck on this pendulum. Oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm not fit for a relationship. It never works. It must be something about me. Or it goes in, I can never find the right man or woman. They always let me down. And so you see, those are the two extremes of the same pendulum of energy, of understanding who you are. And what we're trying to do is to bring you into what we call the Wu Wei, the balanced approach. And very interesting, a client said to me just yesterday, he said, oh, well, this is easier, isn't it? This Wu Wei approach is much more difficult. And I'm saying, no, it's only more difficult because you don't have to make these snap judgments, and you have to just think about it and connect to your spirituality, your true nature of who you really are, how you want to live your life, that you treat yourself better than other people have treated you, that you respect yourself, that you love yourself, that you nurture yourself, that you care for yourself, and you hold yourself in high esteem, not as some kind of pinball machine reacting to everything that's going on and ending up with thinking, poo me, I'm the victim. Because if you think like that, have a look at some of our law of attraction videos. Because if you're thinking like that, those are the people you're attracting to your life.
And a couple of things you mentioned there, David, in terms of how our obsessive thinking manifests, it really is very childlike. So I can definitely see how it's our inner child driving this, because as you say, no matter how much we don't want to have the obsessive thinking. It's like a child constantly pulling at our sleeve of our jacket saying, Mummy, Daddy, notice me. I want to tell you about this. And like, you can't, no matter how much, it will not stop. And also, just like the child, as you said, it will present you with the extremes like a child does. It's the worst disaster. It's the worst possible outcome. It's the worst thing that's going to happen. A young child does not reason. A young child does not think logically, but it's up to us to think, to be the mature adult and to take control of our thoughts.
That's right, Alex. I think I've been doing this job for 45 years, and I'm not saying the metaphor of the inner child is perfect. Of course, it's not perfect. But from all the ones that I work with, and I've been working with this idea of the inner child and describing the inner child, it's the one that empowers you to get the best results quickly, that you don't have to be in counseling for 10 years, twice a week. That once you understand this kind of analogy of looking at it, it becomes much easier for you to take control. And you're absolutely right. That's why I like the metaphor of the inner child, because that part of your mind, no matter how mature and intelligent and wonderful you are in your mature self, some of the circumstances, particularly about compulsive behavior and thoughts, you're being run by a child of about 8 years old. The child is in control. And your description was perfect when you say, Mummy, Daddy. But better still, if you've got a physical child of your own, or you've had a physical child, you must have seen them go, I want it my way, and I want it now, and it's got to be the way I want it. And if I don't, then I'm going to have what I call a squealing piglet. I am going to kick off. And that's how that part of your mind works. And it doesn't matter how mature you are, in those instances, the child's in control. And I can tell you, the number one thing that I get from my clients is they tell me this: I've watched your videos, I've read your papers. Intellectually, David, I agree with you. Of course, I create my internal feelings. Feelings don't float around the room. I don't breathe them in. People don't send them down through their eyes. Of course, intellectually, I agree that I create my feelings. And then they use the magic word, but. But, and that means the inner child is actually in control. What they should say, But David, I'm not actually in control. I've got an 8-year-old inside my head that's running the show.
Is it the same, David, if we are obsessively thinking about something positive in a way that it also
Absolutely.
distracts us from our work, stops us sleeping? So if we're obsessing about someone we're really attracted to, or obsessing about a dream that we've set for ourselves,
Yes.
is it still unhealthy and the same principles still apply?
Well, because when you was explaining that question that the lady sent in, you had to use the word obsessed. So it means then you're not in control.
Exactly, yeah.
The thought is controlling you. You're being, and many videos I talk about like having a pet dog, and the dog has grown up and you haven't trained the dog, and the dog's pulling you around the place. And so when you can't live to your authentic, natural way that you want to live, that define you as a person, and you keep on making excuses. It's not me. It's my mind. It's not me. It's my thinking. It's not me. It's my emotions. You see, all the time, what you're doing is you're making yourself the victim. And you cannot be the victim in the Wu Wei model. You are an amazing, awesome human being. This is a life that you've been blessed with. I want you to have your hand on the tiller of your boat and steering your boat down the stream and river of life. I want you to be in control. And if you make mistakes, which you will, and we all do, is to learn from those mistakes. That's why we call this series Life Lessons. We will constantly, life lessons never stop. They constantly keep on coming, and you get better at dealing with them. But what the inner child comes on and says, whoa, stop, let me control the river of life. And then we don't have to learn any life lessons, do we? It'll just be the way I want it to be. And if I nag you for long enough, if I go round and around, please, mommy, daddy, please, 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 I might get my own way, because I always get my own way. And that's why dealing with the inner child, as beautiful as they are absolutely willful, and they will dig their heels in at anything, and they will not give up. And that's why you have to learn the techniques. Have a look at our reparenting the inner child videos, where we show you the steps, 1, 2, 3 steps on how to deal with it with your child.
So if we are obsessing about something negative
Or
in the
positive.
past or the future, or positive, it means we're not thinking in balance. We're not thinking authentically. We are not in our Wu Wei flow. We're not able to deal with our relationships, our family, our career, our life, our health in a balanced, authentic, and healthy way. So let's talk about breaking this carousel of despair, David. If I am obsessively thinking about a specific worst case scenario outcome, so we won't be too detailed on this, because we want to keep it general enough for the listener to kind of be able to relate to this. But I can't get it out of my mind. I know it's affecting me. It's keeping me awake at night. It's distracting me from getting on with my work. It's making me crotchety with my partner. It's no good for me. But no matter how much my inner child is constantly tugging at my sleeve with this worst case scenario, what is the first thing I need to do?
Well, I hope you were listening when Alex was trying to put that question, because did you hear the words, I can't get it out? You see?
Yeah.
Then she made herself the victim. I want to change. Of course I want to change. Why would I keep this negative thought? But I can't get it out of my head. And you see, in that moment, you've surrendered. You have now become the victim to your inner child. So what you have to do is what we call in our model, the flip. You have to say, why am I choosing to hold on to this thought or belief? What is the benefit in this for me? Now, your first response will always be, of course I'm not really, no. And they'll push back. Then, no, you're doing it. It's your thoughts. Drop your shoulders. Take a breath. Be reasonable. You can carry on thinking that. I am not trying to stop you from thinking that. All we're asking is, why are you choosing to think it?
Okay, so I agree with you. I do not want to be, I no longer want to be the harassed parent to my inner child,
Yes.
worst case scenarios that it keeps presenting me with. Why am I choosing
Yes.
to keep thinking this worst case scenario, even though I know it's affecting me in a bad way?
So I wouldn't make it that complicated,
Okay,
Alex.
why am I choosing
Why
to
am
keep
I
thinking about this?
choosing a worst case
Okay,
scenario? What is the
because,
benefit?
well, I'm choosing to keep thinking this worst case scenario because I'm scared that it's going to happen.
So
Yeah.
now you see, now you had to use the feeling word. So now, Alex, when she's doing that role play, I only asked her the one question, flipped the question. Now she's brought in the emotion. So you see, now we're on the golden thread. Just asking the why question, giving yourself time. We're just trying to get you responsible and accountable for what you think. So why do you create a feeling of scared?
Okay. I'm scared.
I create a feeling of scared.
Okay, I create a red light feeling of being scared because if this worst case scenario happens, it's going to be a disaster and I'm not going to be able to cope with it.
So you see, second layer, we've come down to one of the three layers. I can't cope. So you see, this started because the golden thread is like reverse engineering. So the first step, well, we're not to the first step yet. So a thought is, I can't cope. That creates a feeling that Alex is calling scared, a red light feeling. Then when she experiences feeling scared, she then creates another thought.
Yeah, which is this is going to happen.
I've got to avoid it.
I've got to avoid it at all costs. I can't. And then I'm like, I'm not going to be able to avoid it. So then I get more anxious.
There's the circle.
Okay.
So we're down to I can't cope. Okay, so if I was working with Alex, I know this is always difficult for you to do this role play. Now we're down to the inner child. Little Alex is telling us she can't cope. So as I've demonstrated as on the videos, you change your approach now because you're speaking to little Alex and she's about 6, 7, 8, 9, that type of age. So you do not go aggressive. You do not raise your voice. I would always call your inner child a little pet name like sweetheart or little one or son, just something that's a bit softer. And I would say, okay, sweetheart, why do you believe you can't cope?
Because I think things like this have happened in the past and I've not been able to cope then. But when I think about it, things like this scenario I'm imagining happened in the past, I was younger, I was a younger adult, or I was a younger child.
And so I know it's difficult to do the role play, but you see what the part of Alex's mind that we're calling little Alex is what she's done is saying, in the past I experienced it and I didn't like it.
And I don't want it to happen again.
And I don't want it to happen.
My inner child's saying, under no circumstances,
there you go.
Therefore I need to protect myself.
There you go. So I hope you're getting the idea. Then you would be saying to little Alex, okay, sweetheart, would you like us to see if we can teach you how to cope with these things?
Well, her first thought is to say, I just don't want it to happen at all. Okay. It's like the inner child wants to.
So this is the inner child.
The inner child just wants the perfection. The inner child just wants the good outcome. It doesn't really want to have to get involved in. Well, does it? I think when you put it like that, the inner child is, when you speak calmly to the inner child rather than dismiss it or squash it down or push it away or criticize it, My inner child is now a little bit more interested in thinking, well, if you're going to support me,
Yes.
the adult me,
Yes.
if you're going to support me, then maybe it won't be so bad if it happens.
Well, it's even a little bit better than that, sweetheart, because Big Alex and David, I'm like your Uncle David, are even going to hold your hand. And we're going to walk with you as we go through this so that you learn how to cope in these situations. So never again will you be in a position where you'll be scared. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Well,
Never again.
my inner child saying that would be wonderful, but in the past, you've let me down.
That's right.
In the past, you've not been able to cope.
Okay, so you see now what the inner child is doing now. She's turned the tables and now she's blaming the adult Alex. And then I would have to say, well, this is why adult Alex has come to me. So we can all learn these lessons and you can be part of this learning experience. So if I offer you something that you don't like, that you think you're not ready to do, that's okay. You just tell us. And then we'll find a way that we can take very tiny steps to empower you to be even stronger, to be more determined, as in the right way, that never again, sweetheart, will you have to go and run and hide and lock yourself away, because you'll have the knowledge and the understanding to deal with everything that comes your way. So you see, it's very difficult for Alex to role play because everyone that does this, it's a nuance slightly different for everyone. So we're trying to give you the basic thing. But as Alex says, the main thing is when you get down to the inner child, why, you'll see a scared little child there. This is how I've been doing this job for so long, and I've never met a monster. I've never met a demon. I've never met an evil child. Every child I've met is a scared little child huddled in a corner and just wanting someone to go and sit with them and give them a hug and to say, okay, darling, we'll go at your speed. Don't have to rush. We'll go at the speed that you want to go. And the main thing, I will answer the questions that you have had all of your life and no one's been able to answer, because I think you're an amazing little girl. I think you're spiritual. I think you have everything you need. You're driving a Ferrari here, and I'm going to show you how to use all the gears. And soon you'll be zooming off as into the sunset and living your life free, without restrictions, without worrying about other people. You'll be living authentically, and you'll be living in your truth, your honesty, and your integrity.
And I can see how having this sort of self-inquiry conversation with yourself, asking the questions, what are you thinking? Getting to the emotion, then what are you thinking? The why, getting down to that root lie. So I can't cope, or it could be I'm not lovable or I'm not good enough.
Then you go.
Then we
again.
speak to the inner child. And I can see this gentle, persistent form of self-inquiry, communication. It's a bit like a meditation. And in itself, David, it kind of takes the focus away, the mind away from obsessively thinking about that one worst case scenario.
It is exactly a meditation. In the Taoist sense, a meditation is about being able to focus your mind. So when you come down to the three lies, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable, or I'm unworthy, then you're speaking to your inner child. This is you. And this is the child that's never had correct or balanced or harmonious parenting. And now it's your responsibility. And this is another reason why I like the metaphor or the analogy of the inner child. The way that I see it is the adult is now the spiritual parent. So on that example that we've just used, big mature Alex, intelligent Alex, is now the spiritual mother to little Alex, her spiritual child. And there's something been missing in her education, her spiritual education. I believe it is Alex's responsibility to teach the child. When Alex would come to me, it's my job to teach big Alex and to help big Alex and show her the techniques. And then she doesn't need me, because now the relationship has come together. And instead of little Alex and big Alex fighting each
Yeah.
other in war, they're now together. And the power and the determination of little Alex and big Alex together is like turbocharged. It's going to shoot them on together amazingly well, rather than big Alex wanting to push on and little Alex putting the anchor down. And you get this resistance that you feel. Other people don't realize how hard you work, how much energy you expand. They see this image you put on, they see your mask. They don't understand what's going on inside. And once we can bring those two together, your life changes really dramatically and really quickly.
And so, as part of this reparenting process, David, we've talked about communicating with the inner child, showing that you're going to be there for the inner child to support the inner child if the worst case scenario happens. How important is it, though, to explain to the inner child that this worst case scenario, this thing the child is obsessing about, is not likely to happen? It's just one possibility of often many possible outcomes.
Well, it's part of the process, as I said, and I demonstrate as in the reparenting videos, is the ability to answer the child's question. So if the child is focusing on one outcome and saying, well, this is the worst case scenario, normally in my experience, I say to them, oh, well, that's interesting. So again, watch my wording. Why do you choose to focus on the worst case scenario? Now, you see what I've done now? I've put the responsibility back onto the inner child. I haven't told them, stop thinking about the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
See, because if I tell them, oh, that's silly, stop thinking about the worst case scenario, aren't you? That's never going to happen. That's not going to help the inner child, because he thinks, oh my God, it's going to happen. I say, well, that's interesting. So, sweetheart, why would you only focus on the worst case scenario?
Yeah, because if you dismiss the inner child at that point and say, no, darling, don't be silly. Don't be childish. Then you lose the inner child's trust.
She goes and locks herself
and the inner
away.
child will pull away even further. Then you've made the problem more entrenched.
So you're saying to the inner child, from all of the outcomes, you're right. I often say this, let's make it even worse. This is what I say to my clients. Let's make it even worse. If you think that's bad, let's make an even worse case scenario. So you see, there's lots of scenarios. Which one do you want to focus on, sweetheart? And I say, this one. I go, great. Now, why do you want to focus on that one? Now, see, in that flip, what I've done, I've put the responsibility back onto the inner child. And she'll always say what Alex says. It's because I'm scared of that. Then you say, okay, sweetheart, do you believe that you create your emotions? This is the point where the inner child was saying, no, I don't believe I create them. I believe that other people or the other events create the emotions. And so therefore what she's doing is she's running an emotional protection racket. She's trying to keep herself safe. And so once we can teach her that she creates the emotion, that's like letting her out of a prison that she's built. She's free. She can create any emotion that she wants to, when she wants to. And this is what I'm always saying. I am not saying that you should not create emotions. Let me repeat that. I am not saying you should not create emotions. I am not saying emotions are wrong. I'm saying you create them. Then interpret why you are creating that emotion. That puts the power back onto you. And that's where I want the power to be, with you. So you make decisions that are right for your life. You're not being dragged along like somebody holding on like a skier. That's just come into my mind. You know those, when they're being dragged on the boat? You're not one of those. You are driving the boat, not being dragged along.
And so this gentle emotional education is done through the reparenting. And we've done so many teachings on reparenting.
Important.
I will put links to some of our best teachings, but some of our most valuable teaching in the show notes. So you can unpick those and learn lots more of those techniques.
And the nice thing about this technique is it's something you can do for yourself. You don't have to go sit in a darkened room. You don't have to learn to sit cross-legged. You can be walking. You can be sitting having a cup of coffee, and you can just be saying, now, why do I choose to believe that? See, it's a great question because it puts the responsibility onto you. It doesn't have to be angry. You don't have to be upset. You don't have to create red light emotions of scared or fear or anxiety or jealousy. You just sit quietly with yourself and go deep inside of yourself, that Alex is calling self-inquiry. I call it like reverse engineering. You're just tracing it back and finding what the starting point is, because you are the starting point and I want you in control of it.
And if our inner child is obsessing about another person or a dreamlike scenario, so something positive, but in a way that is to the extreme,
Exactly.
Do we deal with it in the same way?
Exactly the same way, because the inner child will be saying almost the opposite. I will only be happy. My life will only be worthwhile. I will only have value if I get that job, if that person likes me, if something happens, if I get the right car, if I move to that house, if I do this. That's the only reason that's going. See, so as what they're saying is, I'm not creating happiness. The house, the car, the job, the person is going to give me
So they're
happiness.
still obsessing on that one outcome,
Absolutely.
that one person.
Absolutely.
And the lesson then is that
Same
you
lesson.
create the happiness.
Absolutely.
So in the same way you create the red light emotions of scared, anxiousness, worry, fear, you also create the red light emotion of love, happiness, joy,
Confidence,
satisfaction,
self-esteem.
Yeah.
You are creating all of those. So if you're saying, well, I will only get confident if I get that job, you're putting the cart in front of the horse. You're getting completely, you should already be confident whether you get that job or not.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Well, that was a really, really interesting teaching, and I hope it has helped you too. Please do let us know if you enjoyed the teaching. Share it with someone else who you think will also benefit. As I said, I will put links in the show notes to more teachings that will help you with this topic. If you are interested in working one-to-one with David on any of the issues or the inner child work that we talked about in this teaching, David works with clients all over the world every week by Zoom video call, and I will put a link to learn more about David's sessions in the notes below as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we'd love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.